What's going on, everybody? Ab the Audicrat here, and today's the day. Reason 14 is finally here. The fine people over at Reason Studios were nice enough to give me access to the beta a few weeks ago, and today I'm going to be going over all the new features. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, drop a comment, let me know what you think, and like the video. Let's get right into it. So I'm going to break this video into 5 sections. The first section is going to be about the track panel and the sequencer. Then we're going to talk about track folders, and then on to looped clips, then tempo detection and MIDI note chase, and finally we're going to end with the new reverb device, the RV9. So when you first open up Reason 14, it's going to give you this new default template, which if you go to File and then New from Template, this is the sequencer template. Looks a little bit different than Reason 13. I'll go over a few of those differences before we dive into the new updates. On the top panel, a lot of the same buttons. There are icons next to each button you can click. There is a new button for the track panel on the left, which we'll get into. I'm going to swing back to mixer and rack in just a second. There's a dedicated button for the edit area in the sequencer, so you can toggle that on and off. You can hit F8 on your keyboard for quick access there. And then the keys and the regroove mixer buttons, which used to be on the transport window on Reason 13, is now up here. They have their own buttons, just like that. And there is a dedicated settings button, which in the beta, you can't toggle on and off by clicking this. You can only toggle it on, and then you have to X out of it. They'll probably fix that. And then there's a dedicated help button here. On the transport window on the bottom, pretty much the same thing. They rearranged it a little bit, looks a little cleaner. The quantize and the sync buttons are off to the right. They were, I think, off to the left on 13. And then the click, the tap, the pre, and the tempo with the time signature are off to the left. Before we go over the track panel, I wanted to go over the rack and the mixer. There's some pretty big changes when it comes to those. So when you click on the rack button now, it's its own floating window. So just like the mixer, you can click the mixer on and off and it will be in its own window. So what I did here, I took this and brought this all the way down because for me, and most times, I'm really just wanting to get here to mess with panning, the width, mute and solo, and then the volume. And then maybe I'll mess with the main outs as well. And if I need to then access the sends, or I really don't use the EQ or the compressor on the channel strip really ever, or if I need to input the gain from the mixer channel, I can do that. But most times I'm not needing to go to that. So now if you have a ton of tracks, you can just very simply toggle this on and off as a floating window. The big change here is that if you X out of the mixer and you just toggle it back on, it'll bring it back to where it was. In the previous versions, 13 and before, if you X out of this, once you detach it, it will reattach back to the main window, but it doesn't do that now. So you can just toggle on and off. Now, if you don't want to use Reason in this new way, you still could use it in the old way. If you go to the view panel up top and then uncheck show mixer in separate window and show rack in separate window, it'll bring you right back to the old way that you would use Reason. So you just kind of drag these as they were. There's no dedicated sequencer button the way there was because the sequencer at this point is really its own default screen. Another big thing with this too is if you go to the options window and go to rack settings, it's going to be default checked to rack per track. And what this means is that anytime that you click on a track in the sequencer, it's going to have its own rack in this window off to the right. So if I click on the polytone, it'll have its own rack. And I cannot scroll left and right while it's in single column mode. So anything I click on over here, it'll have its own track. A new way to work, but a better way to work, in my opinion. When you go to the pop-up window on the right and you uncheck single column mode, you could still drag through the rack the way that you would if it was attached like it was in previous versions, or if you hold shift, you can still kind of scroll. But if you want to go back to that single column view, you just click it just like that. Or if you unclick this, you can drag this over and have a full view. And then if you want it back to how it was, click the single column. It will snap to the left instead of snapping back to the right, but you just got to drag it back just like this. And then you could toggle with F6. I've been doing that quite a bit, F6 and F5 for the mixer and the rack. A few other quick things to note about the default setting. The mixer is now in dark mode, as a lot of you probably know. It was defaulting to still looking like it was not in dark mode when you did have the rest of the session in dark mode previous to 14. Block mode is also off by default, at least in this template. I haven't really went through all of the templates, but if you do like to work in block mode in the sequencer, go to options and then just click enable blocks, and it will show up over here to the left like it normally has. The device panel on the left is as it was in previous versions, and the browser is pretty much the same as well. They did add in the favorites list new in Reason 14. There's some Europa patches. There's a lot of new drum samples. Something cool to check out if you're looking for some new sounds or patches. And last but not least is arguably the biggest update is the track panel. So when you click this button up here for track panel, which it does not have a hotkey for, I am hoping that they add that in a future update. If you look on the left and I have the polytone selected, from top to bottom, it acts as essentially kind of like a mixer channel or how you would see it in the rack. So you can add a player on top of the polytone here. You could either add a player this way and it will bring the browser up on the left, and you can drag and drop. Or you can browse patches in your instrument by clicking this folder here and then going through all the patches. You can also browse patches for the instrument by clicking this folder icon here. So we have Summer 1984, Tears and Rain Pad. You can also open up your instrument in the rack if you click this arrow, and it'll pop up here and you can see your instrument here. And then you can just close the rack out again. Underneath the instrument, you have your insert effects, like you would see it in the rack. If you hit the plus sign, it will allow you to add an effect from the browser, or you can also add an effect from the list here. I might want to add, let's say, an Audiomatic, and then maybe a flanger. You can also bypass the inserts by clicking the green button underneath all of them on the bottom left, and then you can bypass all effects by this green button in the top left. You can also rearrange right in the track panel, so you can, drag and drop this way. You can do the same thing with players if you have multiple of them open. Just a quick thing to note, you don't always have to go to the rack. You can stick in the track panel for quite a bit of stuff. If you wanted to as well, you can also drag and drop an effect underneath the instrument on this top panel in case you want that to feed right off of the instrument before the mix channel on the rack. Underneath the insert effects, you can access your sends much easier now too. You can bypass on and off. You could also affect the level. And then if you hit this arrow, it'll bring up the send effects that's under the master section the way that it normally is. You can do this for the Ripley as well, and it will highlight it on the rack. Underneath that, each device that you select in the track will also have your mute and solo functions that you would normally see on the mixer. So it's a quick access to that channel from the mixer, panning, stereo width, and then the spectrum EQ. Of course, the level here. Another thing I have noticed to take note of as well, if you have a third-party plugin on your insert effects channel and you double-click, it will bring it up without bringing up the rack. And it makes sense because within the rack, you can't see it unless you click on the VST window to begin with. So this is also another nice touch where it doesn't bring up the rack. You don't have to click on the VST, rack within the rack or device in the rack. You can just double click here and it'll pop open. I'm a huge fan of the F6. You can also right click on all these, bypass, browse, view, and rack. So each of these have more options when you right click. Just another thing to keep in mind when you're going up and down through the track panel. And on that note, in the rack, the signal flow has changed in terms of how things are routed. So it goes basically MIDI up top for any player that you have. In fact, let me add a player on top here. So we have the Arpeggio Lab going into the instrument, which is then feeding into the mix channel, which is then going into the inserts. So it's a lot more logical as to how it would work in the real world, so to speak. In previous versions, the mix channel was above the instrument, so it was a little weird to look at it that way because the signal flow didn't really look like how it would look in real life. Another big update is the signal flow of the inserts. You used to have to hold shift in order to rearrange and change the signal flow from what you have on top to bottom. You don't have to do that anymore. It does it automatically. So if I just drag and drop, it will go from the Audiomatic to the chorus and vice versa. So you used to have to hold shift for this, but no longer. If you're not a fan of the rack per track setting where when you click on a track in the sequencer, it has its own rack, you can switch that to how the older versions had it where you can auto group devices, have no grouping, and freely move things within the rack. I would keep it on rack per track, see how you like it. Again, I think it's going to help people's workflow overall to speed everything up. Next up, we're going to talk about track folders, another interesting update that was long overdue. A lot of other DAWs do have this. This will help you basically just clean up your sequencer when you have a lot going on in your song. So in the rack now, I have a polytone, a monotone, and a few audio tracks. And if I want all of that to be in a folder, I can just click on the polytone, hold shift, click all the way to the bottom track, and then hit Command, Shift, and T, and that's going to throw it right in a folder. If I undo that, I can also right-click that as I have everything selected and go to Track Folder, and then move selected tracks to New Folder, just like that. So this gets really interesting because let's say I wanted to draw some notes in the polytone. You can see here when I draw notes in the clip that it shows a line here. So whether or not I draw any notes actually for any device that I have highlighted, the folder will have its own clip right next to the folder icon on the left. And that basically tells me that within this folder, there is something going on this channel. So for the monotone, if I draw this here, you can also see this here. It corresponds to the folder clip above. Same thing here and here. Now, some cool things you can do. If you highlight this folder clip and let's say hit duplicate, the whole thing duplicates as you can see it here. Or let's say I just wanted to move this by holding Option. You'll also see a clip here where if you hold, it will drag as well. So let's say I wanted to mute that. I can mute this up top. It will mute anything underneath. Same thing over here. Everything will get muted. If I want to start making some cuts up top, it'll also cut to the corresponding clips within that folder. Now, if I mute an individual clip, it doesn't do anything to the top clip up here. But again, I could drag this whole section if I wanted to. mute this whole section. Again, the shortcut to add tracks to a folder is Command-Shift-T on Mac, and I believe it's Control-Shift-T on Windows. Don't quote me on that. If you go to the track panel and then highlight the track folder, you can't add effects to this the same way you would for a bus, but this is really more for organizational and arrangement purposes. Another thing you can do with track folders is right-click on the main folder and go down to track color, and you can apply the same color to all the tracks in the folder, just like that. Let's say I have some more tracks that I want to make a subfolder for. I can highlight, let's say, the bottom 4 here, Command-Shift-T. Now they're in its own folder within the main folder, and you can go 3 deep with that. So let's say these 2 bottom audio tracks I want to highlight, create another folder, and now there's 3 folders within the main folder. If I still drag this top folder clip, it'll still move everything. Same thing with muting and cutting, slicing. Now, if I drag a folder clip from, in this case, track folder 3, and I move it over, you'll see that there are track folder clips for the second folder and the main folder that will follow, but any clip that's within the folder above it will not follow. So that's something to note as well. You'll always have the folder clip information above the one that you're moving, move with it, but not the clip info. So if I have something in a track on the first folder, something on track in the second folder, and I'm just moving something on the second folder track, you'll see the 2 clips for folder 2 and 1, but not this clip that we'll go over. Now, for some people, this might not seem like a big part of the update. I think it's gonna help when you have a very big song with 20, 30, 40 tracks in the sequencer. It'll really help with, maybe muting a section really quick and not having to kind of highlight and then mute separately. Might not seem like much, but these things add up in the grand scheme of a song and can really save you time, especially if you want to just kind of drag and drop and duplicate. I haven't really utilized this too much yet. With the beta, it's a little limited in terms of, if you're adding a lot of tracks, it could be buggy and it's just not as fast as the main version. So once I get a full license of this, I'm really going to be diving deep into how I can kind of utilize this in my songs, and I think you will too. Next up, we're going to talk about loop clips. So I dragged over a rhythmic and did a quick drum beat. And you can see the clip looks a little different than it used to. It has a line up top. Now, when you hover over the end of a clip, you can extend the clip this way. And if you right click, you can go down to edit clip name, and let's just call this drum beat. And if you hover on the top corner of the clip, it will also extend it like this, which is essentially looping the clip. So before we get too deep into that, I just wanted to double click there, go into the edit window and show a few new features here. So with the pencil tool now, when you go to add MIDI notes, you can also click on the MIDI note with the pencil tool to delete what you just did. And for the velocity of each MIDI note, you can control it using this little node by dragging it up and down. You used to have to go to the pencil tool to then draw it, which was a big pain. I hated doing that. You can also highlight a bunch and drag them together. And when you hover over a note now, there's a bracket which allows you to extend. Either way. Now, a few things that are to note when it comes to looped clips. If I go into this first section and I want to move the clap, it will move the clap on both sections of the looped clip. So if I wanted to highlight, let's say all of that, and I move it up, it'll also move it up over here. It's going to undo that. Now, if I hover over the clip and hold Option, it will scale what I did with the MIDI notes in different ways. So let's say I did this. Essentially speeding up what I did within the clip without changing the tempo. That's how I had it. And then if I scale it even more, we'll slow it down. If you look at the top here where it says loop length and loop offset, you can also do some interesting variations to where basically the downbeat will be within any given clip. So you can have some fun with that as well. If you also right click anywhere within this loop clip and you go down to loop clips, you can convert this entire thing into one single clip. You can convert it all to separate clips, or you can go to duplicate loop instance. So what that does is give you exactly what you had in that section of the loop clip, but now on top of it, you can go in and make edits and it will only edit there. So you can really just drag this over here, let's say you want, and you still have your looped clip, but you have the ability to kind of drag something on top. So let's say you wanted to, add some sort of fill at the end here. So let's just say at the end of this, you wanted just to have hi-hats. But then you don't want it there. You can just drag it, drop it, duplicate it, and hover right over all these clips. So really neat feature if you want to mess around with different variations and, at the beginning or the end of any individual clip. And like I said, if you want to convert, let's just say this to its own, go down to loop clips, duplicate loop instance, double click, and then when you go in there, you're gonna be editing just within this clip. Another cool feature of loop clips, I'm gonna add an effect and drag and drop here. I'm gonna drag and drop the easy fuzz setting from Scream 4. And if I bring it up in the rack, and let's say I wanted to mess around with the damage control, I can put a clip here to mess around with the automation of the damage control the way you normally could, do something like this. And instead of duplicating, I can just drag just like this. And now I have. Where it really gets interesting is, let's say I go all the way to the end of this and I hold Option. I can stretch this in like I'm time stretching audio, and now it'll do something like this. So that's a little weird, but you can imagine how you can get really creative with this. You go all the way here. So even if I do this, let's say I go from within the clip, I can kind of stretch it that way into 16th notes. Not incredibly noticeable here, but you kind of get the idea. You can get really creative here. And of course, if you go in and edit in one clip, it'll edit in all the clips. And just like when I was doing this with the MIDI, let's say I wanted this to be a little bit different. If I go to loop clips, duplicate instance, I can make this one go a little wild. And then I can just highlight and duplicate like that. And you can do this with all different kinds of parameters on different types of devices and just have fun with it, see what you come up with. Now let's take an audio track. So let's go to samples and then miscellaneous samples. So if I take this sample and then I draw it out as a looped clip, if I double click and let's say I mess with any of the track markers to, stretch the audio, it'll stretch it not only here, but also here. You can also do the same thing by stretching like I did with the other clips, or if you hold in the middle, you can stretch this to bring just the beginning back like this to give, some pretty cool variations in a really quick way. Next up is tempo detection and MIDI note chase. Now, Reason already did this in previous versions where it detected the tempo for MP3s and waves by using the ID3 info within the file itself. But now, as long as the file is 1, 2, 4, or 8 bars, it will detect it right on import and pretty much snap it to the grid of whatever tempo you're working in. So for example, this is at 90 BPM right now. If I go to the browser and grab a sample, and I just drag and drop it. You can see this is a 4-bar loop and it's snapped right to the end of the 4th bar. And let's say I want to make some edits and maybe this thought it was at either double the speed or half the speed. If you go down to the edit area and then hit edit under tempo, you can change what the actual tempo of the recording is in case it thinks it's faster or slower than what it is. So if for some reason this imported and it thought it was at 65 BPM, you can just say, nope, this is 130, and then everything will be adjusted accordingly. So you can also scale the tempo here by 2, by another 2, go back. I don't always work like this. I tend to use samples within Mimic, and I kind of do some chopping within the sequencer. But if you know that the sample itself is 1, 2, 4, or 8 bars, this, again, will speed your workflow up quite a bit. So cool new feature. Now, I just dragged over a complex synthesizer into the track panel and just drew one note, almost 2 bars. When MIDI note chase was not available in previous versions, if you hit play from the beginning of a MIDI note, it will play the note. But then if you're halfway through a very long note, it won't play anything. So what it does now is it will play when you hit play again if it's stopped. So you can hear it from the beginning because I hit play, but now if I hit play from almost halfway through the 1st bar, it'll play again. This could get a little weird when you're editing drum notes. It works much better with long, drawn-out, let's say, pads or any type of, drawn-out synth notes. A nice feature to have depending on what type of music you make. It's probably gonna really help certain people as opposed to others. And if you don't want it on, you just go to the options window up top, go to playback and recording, and you can just uncheck chase notes during playback. And last but not least is the brand new RV9 reverb station. So I dragged over an ID8 instrument device and just have it set to piano. And that's with no reverb. And if I turn it on, this is the room. And decay is set to 12 o'clock. And as you toggle between the different algorithms to hall and arena, the decay time will essentially stay the same within the knob. The actual seconds might change a little bit, but there's a few pretty interesting settings called spectral and granular. And then there's also echo verb. And then you have plate, and then spring. So from left to right here, the decay, of course, controls your decay time. There's damping for the low frequencies and also the high frequencies, which is not quite an EQ. It's just how quick the low end frequencies tail off or not. So you can, drag that up. They won't tail off as much. Same thing with the high frequencies. So can't really hear the high there. Can't really hear the low there. If I turn this back down. To the right of that, there is a width knob, which is by default set to stereo, and to bring it back to the left is really just putting it in mono. So it's not a stereo knob, so to speak, but it does fold it to mono. On the right, there's a feature called ducking. So when this is on and the level is high, it essentially ducks, turns down the reverb when you hit the note, and then it kind of comes back on. Now, if you have the decay all the way down, it doesn't actually mess with the decay of the reverb, but if you have it up, every time you hit a new note, the decay kind of goes away. So if you go from, let's say, major to minor, and then the recover is just how fast it comes back up. You can see how fast or how slow that the decay goes down. All the way to the left, when you click on the open button, it gives you a new panel, which has some extra features. So I'm gonna go over the EQ setting first. The RV7000 had an EQ, but it was really basic. This one is much better. It has a low shelf, a high shelf, and then a couple mid bands here. And there's also a shimmer section here, so you can hear the shimmer after you hit a note or a chord. And you can control how much that's getting. So when it's set to octave, when you hit a note, it'll shimmer with the higher octave note. You can also do fifth, fourth, or octave down. Very cool. Now back to the left, there's a pre-delay section, and you can control the time there. You can sync it to the beat as well. And there's more controls over whatever algorithm that you have it set to. So let's say the room, you can, mess with the entry level reverberation, the size of the room, and then the modulation of it. Another thing that is very interesting is it has this freeze area and then kill. So it kind of acts as almost like what a sustain pedal would act like. So if I hold down a chord and then hit the freeze button, it holds the reverb, and then I can kill it when I want to. Now, if freeze is on and then you go to hit a note, it doesn't do anything, but if it's off, you hit the note, then let go, it'll freeze the reverb. And then if you want to kill it, just hit the kill button. And each different algorithm has different settings that you can mess with. So for the spring setting, there's different types of springs. You can mess with the size, and then the flutter. Kind of an unrealistic sound, but you can get pretty creative using this. So with the plate, there's, different types of plates. The size of the plate. A few of the odd algorithms I want to go over as well. So this one's called echo verb. So it really is like a delay, but there is verb on the delay. You can mess with the delay time, the amount in the diffuse section. And there's also a spread knob. You could sync it to the beat as well. So when you're looking to mix a delay and a reverb, you can do it all within this on the echo verb setting. Granular and spectral are a little bit more complicated, and I'm still honestly learning this. So this has some very interesting presets to when you're using, let's say in this case, the spectral. There's different type of resonances you can set it to and how much it's getting. You can also shift what part of the frequencies are getting this, odd notch effect. There's also the granular setting, which is even more interesting, and I'm learning that as well. Kind of acts as like a delay. There's a rate knob at how fast you're hearing the delayed reverberation, so to speak. And there's a pitch modulation knob here, which kind of messes with the pitch. A diffuse knob. There's also a reverse knob. I think I'm going to have a dedicated video to the RV9 because there's so much you can do with all different types of sounds, especially drum sounds and, you know, different types of instruments. And that's going to do it for my Reason 14 review of all the new features. If you stayed with me to the end, thank you very much for joining. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, drop a comment, let me know if I missed anything or how you felt about the video. I always love hearing feedback. In the description, you'll see a link to my newsletter that I drop once a month, just a review of what I did the month prior. I also have a link to buy me a coffee if you're feeling extra frisky. That goes a long way to help me keep making my content. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.